Flight attendant kicks black girl off plane. 7 minutes later. She owns the airline. She experienced a deep sense of humiliation as she was unceremoniously forced from her seat, but just moments later, the very flight attendant who had shamed her found herself facing unexpected consequences. What unfolded during this flight would alter the course of events, not only for those on board, but for the entire airline as well. Before we dive in, we'd love to hear from you in the comments about where you're tuning in from today. If you find these stories captivating, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Emma Thompson stepped onto the airplane with a calm confidence that caught the attention of a few passengers. She wore a beautifully tailored blazer over a sleek dress, her natural curls softly framing her face. In one hand, she confidently held a leather laptop bag, while in the other, her boarding pass fluttered slightly. As she made her way down the aisle, she glanced at the seat numbers, each step purposeful. Ava's demeanor radiated calm and composure, yet there was an undeniable spark of quiet determination in her eyes, a testament to her unshakable spirit. Upon reaching her assigned seat in the first-class section, she offered a warm smile to the passenger beside her before placing her bag in the overhead compartment. With a graceful motion, she settled into her seat, ready for the journey ahead. She pulled out a small notebook and pen, her heart racing as she began jotting down a few notes. Her focus was unwavering, completely absorbed in her task, blissfully unaware of the curious glances that flickered her way from those around her. Moments later, Lauren Mitchell, one of the flight attendants, strode purposefully through the cabin. Dressed in her crisp uniform, Miranda's sharp gaze seemed to scrutinize every passenger she passed. When her eyes landed on Ava, she paused, a spark of intrigue igniting within her. Though it wasn't immediately clear what had captured her attention, Miranda's expression tightened, and she continued on her way, leaving a lingering sense of curiosity in the air. Closer, Miranda stopped just beside Ava's seat. "Excuse me," she said, her tone polite yet laced with an unmistakable edge. "Can I see your boarding pass, please?" Ava looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but she remained unfazed. With a small, confident smile, she handed over her boarding pass. "Of course." Miranda scanned the ticket, her brow furrowing slightly. "This is for first class?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Yes," Ava replied simply, her voice steady and unwavering. "That's correct." Miranda's frown deepened, as if she were grappling with an internal conflict. After a brief pause, she returned the boarding pass, her lips pressed together, leaving the air thick with unspoken tension. She walked away, her posture rigid, but there was an unmistakable hint that she still had more to say. Ava, on the other hand, brushed off the encounter, immersing herself in her notes, her pen gliding purposefully across the paper. She remained oblivious to Miranda, who was speaking softly with another flight attendant nearby, casting furtive glances in her direction. The tension etched on Miranda's face was palpable, even from a distance. It wasn't long before Miranda approached again, this time exuding a more commanding presence. "Miss Carter, could you step aside for a moment? I need to verify something." Ava blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift. With a serene demeanor, she stood, clutching her laptop bag, and followed Miranda toward the galley. Passengers in first class exchanged curious glances, their whispers filling the air. Yet Ava's composure remained unwavering as she waited in the narrow space for Miranda to say something. "I'm going to have to ask you to move to a different seat," Miranda stated, her arms crossed, a hint of authority in her voice. "It seems there may have been a mistake with your booking." Ava tilted her head slightly, her brow furrowing in confusion. "A mistake? I don't think so. I booked this ticket weeks ago, and it was confirmed. Could you please double-check?" Miranda's tone turned icy. "I've already looked into it, and I truly believe this seat isn't suitable for you. I'm going to need you to take a seat in the main cabin." The words lingered in the air, and for the first time Ava's expression shifted. A fleeting glimpse of disbelief and annoyance flickered across her face, but she quickly masked it with composure. "I don't understand. My ticket is valid. Why must I move?" Miranda stiffened, her voice dropping to a sharp whisper. "I don't have time to explain. Either you move or I'll have to call security to assist." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded once, quietly returning to her seat to gather her belongings. The entire cabin seemed to be watching now, the murmurs swelling like a tide as Ava walked toward the back of the plane, escorted by Miranda. She could feel the stares of other passengers piercing through her, and though she held her head high, her grip on her laptop bag tightened ever so slightly. When they reached the main cabin, Miranda gestured toward an empty seat in the middle row. With a mix of determination and unease, Ava placed her bag under the seat and sat down in silence. Miranda walked away, leaving Ava to adjust to her new cramped spot. Ava gazed out the window, her face a mask of calm, yet her mind was a whirlwind of frustration and disbelief. She reached into her bag, retrieving her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as she crafted a message. When she hit send, a small, knowing smile danced at the corners of her lips. Ava remained quietly in her new seat, her expression inscrutable, while the hum of the airplane engines enveloped the cabin, a constant reminder of her turbulent thoughts. The tension enveloping her was thick and suffocating. A few passengers shot her sympathetic glances, while others hastily turned away, feigning ignorance of the uncomfortable scene unfolding. Ava, however, remained unfazed, her attention laser-focused on her phone. With determination, she scrolled through her contacts and made a swift call, her voice low yet resolute. "Hello, it's me," she began, urgency lacing her words. "I need a favor. Something's happened, and I need it addressed immediately. Yes, I'm still on the plane. No need to escalate just yet. Just watch for my signal." She ended the call as abruptly as she had initiated it, a sense of resolve settling over her. As she slipped the phone back into her bag, an unsettling calmness enveloped her, almost as if she held a secret that no one else was privy to. Back in first class, Miranda navigated her duties with a sense of fulfillment, checking on passengers, offering warm smiles, and ensuring drinks flowed smoothly. Yet her mind kept wandering back to Ava. There was an unsettling quality to Ava's composure that gnawed at Miranda, leaving her unable to pinpoint the source of her discomfort. In Miranda's eyes, she had managed the situation, but the lingering unease remained. Appropriately, yet a nagging doubt clung to the corners of her mind. Meanwhile, Ava's gaze drifted to the flight attendant assigned to the main cabin, a younger woman named Sophie Bennett. Unlike Miranda, Sophie Bennett radiated empathy. She approached Ava with caution, cradling a cup of water. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" Sophie Bennett asked softly, her eyes brimming with genuine concern. Ava looked up, her smile warm yet tinged with grief. "I'm fine, thank you. Just a bit of a mix-up, I suppose." Sophie Bennett hesitated, clearly sensing that there was more beneath the surface. But Ava's composed demeanor discouraged any further probing. Probing, Sophie Bennett gently placed the water on Ava's tray before stepping away, her voice laced with concern. As the flight continued, Miranda remained blissfully unaware of the ripple effect her actions had unleashed. In stark contrast, Ava was fully aware and in command of the situation. She leaned back in her seat, gazing out at the clouds drifting by, her fingers tapping a steady rhythm on the armrest. Though her calm exterior suggested tranquility, a tempest of emotions swirled just beneath the surface. Ava was not the type to let this go unnoticed, but she also was not one to easily lose her temper. She cherished precision over chaos. Her meticulously crafted plan was already in motion. 7 long minutes ticked by before a voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for flying with us today. We hope you're enjoying your flight. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to let one of our crew members know." Ava's gaze darted to the front of the plane, her expression a mask of calm. She pulled out her notebook once more, inscribing a single line before closing it with a firm snap. Whatever it was, she was ready to face it. Her next move was unmistakable. She was ready for it. The cabin embraced a serene rhythm, with passengers lost in their books, movies, or hushed conversations. Ava sat motionless in her seat, her face serene yet radiating an intensity that suggested something was simmering just below the surface. In contrast, Miranda appeared more relaxed, gliding through her routine with practiced ease. As she distributed drinks, she cast a glance at the first-class section, a flicker of triumph igniting within her. The issue had been resolved, and the discomfort she had felt was now behind her. Yet the memories lingered, refusing to fade away. Ava leaned slightly forward in her seat, her heart racing as she unlocked her phone once more. Her fingers hovered over the screen, a mix of anticipation and anxiety swirling within her, before she typed a brief, enigmatic message. "They'll call soon. Let me know when it's done." With a quick tap, she sent it off, the soft glow of the phone illuminating her composed face. The message went unnoticed by the other passengers, who were either lost in their own worlds or simply indifferent. A subtle smile graced Ava's lips, but her eyes held a piercing intensity that Miranda would have recognized all too well. It was unsettling, the thought that she might have noticed. At the front of the plane, Miranda made her way to the galley, exchanging a few hushed words with Mark Sullivan, an older and more seasoned flight attendant who had been with the airline for years. He often took on the role of mentor for the younger crew members. Leaning in, Miranda lowered her voice, a hint of urgency in her tone. "Did you see that woman earlier?" she asked, casting a subtle glance in Ava's direction. Mark Sullivan raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "Which one?" he inquired. "The one I moved to economy," Miranda clarified, her unease palpable. She had a ticket for first class, but something about her just didn't sit right. She looked so out of place, and it made Mark Sullivan frown as he leaned against the counter. "Out of place? What do you mean?" Miranda hesitated, sensing the weight of her words. She knew she had to tread carefully. "I just have this gut feeling, you know? It's better to be cautious than sorry, right?" Mark Sullivan's frown deepened, and he shot back. "A gut feeling doesn't justify bumping someone without cause." "Did she do anything wrong?" "No," but Mark Sullivan interrupted her with a sharp look. "You'd better hope this doesn't come back to bite you, Miranda. First-class passengers don't take kindly to being moved, and neither does the airline." Miranda opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the in-flight phone in the galley buzzed. Mark Sullivan picked it up, his expression remaining neutral as he listened. A moment later, his brow furrowed, and he glanced at her, a mix of curiosity and concern etched on his face. "It's for you," he said, handing her the phone. "They're asking for you by name." Miranda's heart raced, skipping a beat as a wave of uncertainty washed over her. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the receiver, feeling the weight of the moment. "This is Miranda," she said cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. The voice on the other end was calm but firm, sending a shiver down her spine. "This is the airline executive office. We've received a direct complaint about an incident involving a first-class passenger. We need you to provide a detailed report upon landing. For now, please ensure all passengers are treated with the utmost respect and refrain from altering seating arrangements without proper justification." Miranda's face paled slightly as the gravity of the situation settled in. "Yes, of course," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll make sure everything is handled appropriately." As she hung up, her hand trembled slightly, and Mark Sullivan watched her, concern etched on his face. His expression was a mystery, leaving her heart racing with uncertainty. "What's going on?" Miranda muttered, but the tremor in her voice revealed her anxiety. She cast a quick glance toward the main cabin, where Ava sat, her serene presence now taking on a weighty significance. For the first time, a flicker of unease ignited within Miranda. Ava, sitting quietly with her notebook resting closed on her lap, appeared blissfully unaware of the tension in the air. Yet as Miranda returned to her tasks, she caught a glimpse of Ava's lips curling into the faintest smile. It was as if the tide had just begun to shift, and Miranda was only starting to grasp the depth of what was unfolding. As the storm loomed ominously on the horizon, Miranda fought to dispel the gnawing unease that clung to her like a heavy fog. She moved through the cabin, but the haunting echoes of the phone call replayed in her mind, casting a shadow over her thoughts. With a determined smile plastered on her face, she engaged with the passengers, performing her duties with a mechanical precision that felt foreign. Yet her gaze was irresistibly drawn to Ava, who sat serenely in the main cabin, exuding an unsettling calmness that made Miranda's heart race. It was as if Ava possessed a secret knowledge, a quiet confidence that left Miranda feeling exposed. Meanwhile, Ava leaned back in her seat, her eyes flickering to her watch. crossing her legs with an air of nonchalance that only deepened Miranda's sense of disquiet. The in-flight magazine lay open in her hands, her fingers flipping through the pages almost unconsciously. To an observer, she appeared completely at ease, as if her day had been untouched by chaos. Yet within the depths of her mind, every detail of her carefully crafted plan was unfolding with precision. The flight attendant, Sophie Bennett, approached Ava once more, her warm and gentle demeanor a striking contrast to the earlier coldness from Miranda. "Excuse me, ma'am," Sophie Bennett said softly. "Would you like anything to drink? Perhaps a snack?" Ava looked up, her lips curving into a polite smile. "Just water, please." Sophie Bennett nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with a cup of water and a small napkin were placed gently on Ava's tray table. "If there's anything else you need, just let me know," Sophie Bennett added with a kind smile. Ava's eyes softened as she replied, "Thank you, Sophie Bennett," glancing at her name tag. Her tone was warm, and her gratitude felt deeply genuine. Sophie Bennett returned a small smile before walking away, leaving Ava to her thoughts. From a distance, Miranda observed the exchange, her unease growing. The way Ava interacted with Sophie Bennett, so poised and polite, clashed with the narrative Miranda had constructed in her mind. It bothered her more than she was willing to admit, stirring a sense of discomfort within her. An overwhelming urge surged within her to reclaim control over the situation, yet she understood the need to tread lightly. The call from the executive office had made that abundantly clear. As the plane soared at 30,000 feet, the steady hum of the engines only amplified the tension coiling in Miranda's chest. She found herself drawn back to the galley, where Mark Sullivan was diligently preparing the next round of refreshments. "Everything okay?" he asked, casting a concerned glance her way. Miranda hesitated, the weight of her emotions pressing down on her, before she managed a curt, "Yeah, fine." But Mark Sullivan, sensing the storm beneath her surface, leaned in closer, his concern palpable. His voice was low, filled with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Look, whatever's going on, you'd better hope you didn't mess with the wrong passenger. First class isn't for amateurs, Miranda. These people have connections." Miranda stiffened at his words, a wave of unease washing over her. But she chose silence, instead focusing on arranging the cups, even though her mind was racing with thoughts. Mark Sullivan's warning had struck a deep chord within her. Who was Emma Thompson really, and why did she feel an unsettling sense of misjudgment? Just then, Ava's phone buzzed softly in her lap. She stole a glance at the screen, her expression a mask of unreadable emotions, as the message loomed before her. Was brief, yet charged with an unspoken weight. They were keeping a watchful eye on Ava as she slid her phone back into her bag, silence enveloping her like a protective cloak. She took a sip of water, each movement deliberate, calm, and unhurried, as if she possessed an eternity to spare. The subtle tension simmering between Ava and Miranda did not escape the notice of a few keen-eyed passengers. A man across the aisle leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "That flight attendant has been giving you a hard time, hasn't she?" Ava met his gaze, her expression a mask of neutrality. "It's nothing I can't handle," she replied softly, her words laced with quiet strength. The man raised an eyebrow, sensing the deeper currents beneath her calm exterior. There was so much more to the story, yet he chose not to delve deeper. Ava turned her gaze back to the window, her eyes tracing the endless expanse of clouds. Beneath her composed facade, a quiet satisfaction bubbled within her. The wheels were in motion, and Miranda remained blissfully unaware of the far-reaching consequences that awaited her. Meanwhile, in the first-class section, Miranda's unease intensified with each passing minute, stretching time into an agonizing eternity. The weight of that earlier phone call loomed heavily over her, and an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. Something was on the brink of unfolding. Something was about to happen that she couldn't control. The atmosphere in the cabin thickened with each passing minute, even though the plane itself flew steadily through the sky. Miranda's movements became more tense. Her once assured stride was now replaced by anxious glances. She busied herself with checking seat belts and handing out drinks, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Ava. Each time Miranda looked toward the main cabin, Ava seemed unfazed, exuding a quiet authority that sent shivers down Miranda's spine. Meanwhile, Ava appeared utterly composed. Unfazed, she kept her eyes fixed on the world outside, her pen dancing across the pages of her notebook with a quiet determination. To the casual observer, her actions might have appeared ordinary, but there was an undeniable depth to her focus that hinted at something more profound. The passengers around her couldn't help but feel the stark contrast between her serene demeanor and Miranda's escalating anxiety. Whispers fluttered through the air, a silent acknowledgement of the growing tension, yet no one dared to voice their concerns. Miranda's discomfort reached a boiling point when Mark Sullivan approached her once more in the galley, his hand extended with a folded note, a tangible symbol of the unease that had been building between them. His expression was a mystery, and with a quiet intensity he said, "The captain wants to see you." A wave of confusion washed over her. "What? Why?" Miranda's voice came out sharper than she had intended, a mixture of surprise and unease. Mark Sullivan shrugged, but she could sense a hint of disapproval in his gaze. He didn't need to say it. She could feel the weight of his unspoken thoughts. Reluctantly, Miranda made her way toward the cockpit. As she stepped inside, the door closed behind her, isolating her from the rest of the cabin. Captain James Reynolds, a middle-aged man exuding a calm yet commanding presence, turned to face her. His co-pilot shot her a brief glance before returning his focus to the controls. "Miranda," Captain James Reynolds began. His tone was steady, but the weight of his words hung heavily in the air. They had received another call from the executive office, and Miranda felt her heart plummet. "Sir, she began, but the captain raised a hand, silencing her. "This is serious. The passenger you moved, Miss Emma Thompson, is not just any passenger. She has connections to the airline's board of directors. We are under direct orders to ensure she is treated with the utmost respect for the remainder of the flight." Miranda's mouth went dry, panic rising within her. "I didn't know," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I thought—" "Did you think—" Captain James Reynolds interrupted, his voice growing firmer, a hint of frustration creeping in. "Or did you assume, because from where I'm sitting there, it seemed you acted without reason, and that's simply unacceptable." Miranda opened her mouth, desperate to defend herself, but the words just wouldn't come. The captain let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his temples in frustration. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You'll return to your duties and make sure there are no more incidents. When we land, you'll provide a full report to the ground team. Until then, do not approach Miss Carter unless it's absolutely necessary. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," Miranda whispered, her cheeks aflame with embarrassment. The captain nodded toward the door, signaling her dismissal. With a heavy heart, Miranda left the cockpit, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. With her mind racing, she hurried back to the galley where Mark Sullivan shot her a questioning look. Ignoring him, she grabbed a tray of drinks, pushing herself to navigate through the cabin. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee for a first-class passenger, spilling a few drops onto the tray. Cursing under her breath, she quickly wiped it away. Meanwhile, in the main cabin, Ava remained undisturbed, her every action deliberate and measured. As Miranda passed by, Ava glanced up briefly, their eyes locking for a fleeting moment, and in that instant, everything felt charged with unspoken tension. There was a chilling malice in her gaze, accompanied by an unsettling calmness, as if she were fully aware of how this would all unfold. Miranda quickened her pace, retreating to the galley once more, and for the first time in her career, she felt utterly out of control, and she loathed it. Yet deep within her, a nagging sensation lingered, whispering that she had just made the gravest mistake of her life. As she returned to the galley, her steps faltered, her breathing uneven. She struggled to concentrate on the task before her, but the captain's words reverberated in her mind, haunting her with the realization that she was connected to them. The phrase hit her like a punch to the gut. How could she have overlooked something so crucial? Miranda had always taken pride in her instincts, but now those very instincts felt like a betrayal. She leaned against the counter, her hands gripping the edge tightly, as if it were the only thing anchoring her in this storm of emotions. Mark Sullivan watched her from the corner of his eye, finishing up with the snack cart, his concern palpable. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" he asked, his tone a careful blend of caution and curiosity. Miranda hesitated, torn between the urge to confide and the weight of her secret. Finally, she let out a heavy sigh, her voice barely above a whisper. "The woman I moved, she has ties." To the board, the captain just informed me that Mark Sullivan's expression shifted from mild curiosity to a sudden alarm. "The board? Are you serious?" he exclaimed. Miranda nodded, her face drained of color. "I had no idea," she admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know what I thought." She caught herself, realizing how her words might be perceived. Mark Sullivan crossed his arms, his tone cutting through the air. "She didn't seem like what, Miranda? Like someone who belongs in first class?" Miranda couldn't respond. The weight of his words silenced her. Instead, she turned away, desperately pretending to busy herself with the inventory, her heart racing with unspoken thoughts. Mark Sullivan shook his head, a whirlwind of disbelief and disappointment swirling across his face. Meanwhile, in the main cabin, Ava stole another glance at her watch. The flight was approaching its halfway mark, yet she remained a picture of tranquility. With a graceful motion, she reached into her bag and retrieved her phone, sending off another brief message. "Almost time," she typed, before sliding the phone back into her bag. She leaned back in her seat, her calm demeanor unwavering, even as the passengers around her grew increasingly curious. The man across the aisle, who had spoken to her earlier, leaned forward slightly, his intrigue palpable. His voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Are you sure you're okay?" That flight attendant looked pretty rattled earlier. Ava offered a faint smile, her tone polite yet resolute. "I appreciate your concern, but everything is under control." The man nodded, though skepticism lingered in his eyes. There was something undeniably confident about Ava, leaving him to wonder if she held secrets beneath her calm exterior. Meanwhile, at the front of the plane, Miranda struggled to regain her composure. As she moved through the first-class cabin, checking on passengers, her smile felt forced and fragile, yet her mind raced uncontrollably. The thought that Ava might have ties to the airline's board was troubling enough, but the way she had navigated the entire situation left Miranda feeling deeply unsettled. Ava had always maintained her cool, never raising her voice or losing her composure. Such restraint was both rare and profoundly powerful. As Miranda made her way back to the galley to get ready for the next round of service, a chime resonated through the cabin, heralding an incoming announcement. The captain's voice filled the air over the intercom, calm and professional as he began. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'd like to thank you for choosing to fly with us today. Our flight is progressing beautifully, and we're on track for an on-time arrival. Please continue to savor your journey, and remember, our crew is here for you. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything." As the announcement echoed through the cabin, it felt like a poignant reminder of Miranda's mounting mistakes. She stole another glance at the main cabin, her eyes landing on Ava. To her surprise, Ava met her gaze, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't smug or confrontational. It was a calm, confident acknowledgement that stirred something deep within Miranda. A single gesture sent a shiver racing down Miranda's spine. Whatever Ava Carter was plotting, Miranda was beginning to grasp just how utterly unprepared she truly was for it. The steady hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin as the flight pressed on, but the palpable tension between Miranda and Ava was impossible to overlook. Miranda struggled to concentrate on her duties, yet every movement felt robotic, her mind shrouded in a thick fog of unease. She averted her gaze from the main cabin, but the weight of Ava's presence loomed over her, as if the calm young woman was silently watching her every move. Orchestrating something just beyond the veil of the main cabin, Ava exuded an air of calmness that belied the storm of thoughts within. She stole a glance at her watch, then at the small screen before her, tracking the flight's progress. A fleeting smile graced her lips, only to be snatched away by the weight of her focus. Leaning forward, she retrieved her notebook, her pen gliding across the pages with precision, each word a testament to her intent. To an outsider, it might have appeared as a trivial moment, but for Ava, every nuance held profound significance. Meanwhile, Miranda's unease grew, a palpable tension that hung in the air. She returned to the galley, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed tightly, a clear sign of her inner turmoil. Mark Sullivan, who had been quietly observing her throughout the flight, finally mustered the courage to speak up. "You've been tense ever since that phone call," he said, his tone low yet firm. "What's really going on?" Miranda hesitated, her eyes darting toward the curtain that separated the galley from the main cabin, as if seeking refuge. "I told you already," she muttered, frustration lacing her voice. "The passenger I moved has connections. Important ones." Mark Sullivan raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "Important enough for the captain to get involved? That's not merely connections, Miranda. That's a dire warning." "What did you do to her?" "I didn't do anything," Miranda snapped, but the defensive edge in her voice revealed her inner turmoil. She felt out of place in first class. "And You assumed she didn't belong," Mark Sullivan interrupted, his voice cutting like a knife. "And now you're facing the consequences. Look, I've been with this airline for years. If you cross someone with real power, you better prepare yourself. People like that don't let things slide." Miranda clenched her jaw, her frustration boiling over. What was I supposed to do? She didn't appear to be the kind of person, like someone who could afford the luxury of first class, someone who could easily fly among the elite passengers up there. Miranda fell silent, her hands gripping the counter so tightly that her knuckles turned a ghostly white. Mark Sullivan shook his head, letting out a heavy sigh. "You should have left her alone. Now you've created a mess that's far bigger than you realize." As Mark Sullivan returned to his duties, a wave of panic crashed over Miranda. Deep down, she knew he was right, but it was too late to take back her actions. She cast a glance around, feeling the weight of her choices pressing down on her. As she moved toward the main cabin, Miranda felt her heart racing. Ava remained seated, her demeanor calm, with her notebook now closed and tucked away. The faint smile that once graced her face had vanished, replaced by a look of quiet determination. Suddenly, a chime resonated through the cabin, causing Miranda's heart to skip a beat. It was merely the signal for an incoming call to the Glay phone. She reached for it, her hands trembling ever so slightly. "Glay, this is Miranda," she said, striving to keep her voice steady. "This is the captain," came the voice from the other end. "We've received another communication." From the executive office, a request had come through, demanding that Miss Carter receive full priority service for the rest of the flight. They insisted on her comfort and urged a personal apology for any previous inconvenience. Miranda felt her breath catch in her throat, a mix of shock and urgency flooding her senses. "Yes, sir," she managed to reply before ending the call. She stood there frozen, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't merely a suggestion. It was a command she couldn't disregard. Gathering the remnants of her composure, Randa steeled herself for what lay ahead. Herself to approach Ava again, but this time, she felt the undeniable shift in power dynamics. Whatever was about to unfold, Miranda sensed that her role in this evolving narrative was slipping from her grasp. As she stepped out of the galley, clutching a glass of sparkling water on a tray with trembling hands, her usual poise had evaporated, replaced by a palpable tension. Each step toward the main cabin felt like a monumental struggle, the weight of her earlier decisions pressing down on her, like an anchor, reminding her that this moment was anything but ordinary. As she approached with the water, an unspoken tension hung in the air, a silent recognition that she had indeed crossed a line. When she reached Ava's seat, Miranda hesitated, the tray quivering slightly in her hands. Ava looked up at her, her expression calm and inscrutable, and in that moment, the atmosphere between them thickened with unspoken words. Miranda forced a smile, but it fell short, failing to reach her eyes. "Miss Carter," she began, her voice softer than anyone on the flight had ever heard it before, "I wanted to personally apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced earlier. It was a misunderstanding on my part." Ava tilted her head slightly, her gaze piercing yet composed, as if sensing the tension in the air. A misunderstanding lingered, and she repeated herself, her voice quiet but resolute. Miranda's forced smile wavered, revealing her unease. "Yes, I didn't mean to disrupt your experience. Please accept this as a token of apology," she said, placing the glass of sparkling water on Ava's tray table with a hand that trembled ever so slightly. Ava regarded the glass for a moment, then turned her gaze back to Miranda. "Thank you," she said simply, her tone neutral, yet the weight of her words hung heavily in the air. "But I think it's going to take more than a drink to fix this." The softness of her voice cut through Miranda, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. It hit her like a slap, and she swallowed hard, her palms starting to sweat. "Of course," Miranda stammered. "If there's anything else I can do to make this right, please let me know." Ava didn't respond right away. Instead, she leaned back in her seat, studying Miranda as if she were weighing her next move. The silence stretched on, long enough to make Miranda fidget with discomfort. Finally, Ava offered a faint smile, not one of satisfaction, but rather one of calm confidence. "I appreciate your effort," Ava said at last, "but I believe the airline will address this matter appropriately." After we landed, Miranda felt her stomach drop at the mere mention of the airline. It was a stark reminder that Ava wasn't going to let the incident fade away. "I understand," Miranda murmured, her gaze falling to the floor. "If you need anything else, don't hesitate to ask." Without waiting for a response, she hurried back to the galley, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and her mind swirling with the weight of Ava's words. It was painfully obvious that this situation was far from over, and whatever lay ahead was completely beyond her control. Control Ava, meanwhile, lifted the glass of sparkling water to her lips, savoring a delicate sip before placing it down with utmost care. Her face remained an impassive mask, revealing nothing to the passengers surrounding her. She exuded an air of calm and composure, but deep within, Ava felt the exhilarating shift of power swinging entirely in her favor. Back in the galley, Mark Sullivan raised an eyebrow as he watched Miranda slump against the counter, her face drained of color. "How did it go?" he inquired, concern lacing his voice. Miranda shook her head, her voice barely a whisper, heavy with dread. "She's not done. She's going to take this all the way." Mark Sullivan sighed, his expression a mix of worry and resignation. "Grim, I warned you. People like her don't mess around. You should have seen it coming." Miranda didn't reply. Instead, she found herself fixated on the curtain that divided the galley from the main cabin. Her mind was in turmoil. For the first time, it struck her that Emma Thompson was not just another passenger. She was a force to be reckoned with, someone whose influence far surpassed anything Miranda had ever envisioned. And now she was facing the harsh consequences of her own underestimation. As Miranda lingered in the galley, her thoughts spiraled out of control, replaying the flight's events over and over. She had never felt so insignificant, so utterly dwarfed by the weight of her own misjudgment. She felt so vulnerable after all her years in the airline industry. Mark Sullivan moved quietly around her, casting worried glances her way, yet he remained silent. It was evident that he understood the seriousness of the moment and that Miranda was utterly overwhelmed. Meanwhile, in the main cabin, Ava closed her notebook and tucked it away with careful intention. She straightened her back, sitting tall and poised, as if bracing herself for what was to come. The soft murmur of hushed conversations floated around her, but she remained unfazed, lost in her own thoughts. Her focus remained unwavering, each movement executed with precision. Soon after, the intercom buzzed to life once more, this time resonating with the captain's commanding tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be beginning our descent shortly. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your trays are in their upright positions. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." The announcement ignited a whirlwind of activity as passengers hurriedly adjusted their seats and secured their belongings. Sophie Bennett, the flight attendant who had attempted to assist earlier, returned to Ava's row. She offered a warm smile, yet a flicker of unease danced in her eyes. "Is there anything I can get you before we land, Miss Carter?" Ava shook her head politely. "Thank you, Sophie Bennett. You've been so very kind." Sophie Bennett's cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment, her heart swelling with warmth. "If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to ask," she said, her voice laced with genuine concern before stepping away to continue her duties. Ava's calm tone had wrapped Sophie Bennett in a comforting embrace, but the tension in the cabin was a heavy weight that lingered in the air. In the first-class section, Miranda busied herself with the final checks before landing, her mind racing with the impending arrival. Her movements felt rigid and robotic, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of anxiety raging within her. She fought to maintain a neutral expression, but the captain's earlier command and Ava's quietly impactful words echoed in her mind like a haunting melody. She could sense the weight of Mark Sullivan and the other flight attendants' gazes upon her, even though silence enveloped the cabin as the plane descended through the clouds. Ava, however, stole a glance out the window, her eyes drinking in the sprawling cityscape of their destination. Her fingers rested delicately on the armrest, her demeanor exuding an air of grace, even amidst the turmoil. In the midst of the chaos that Miranda was grappling with, Ava stood as a beacon of control, every moment of their journey aligning perfectly with her expectations. She felt an exhilarating readiness for whatever lay ahead. As the plane glided down for a smooth landing, a wave of relief washed over the cabin, prompting passengers to unbuckle their seatbelts and retrieve their belongings from the overhead compartments. The familiar sounds of rustling and chatter filled the air, yet an unsettling tension lingered, particularly for Miranda, who couldn't shake the acute awareness of Ava's presence and the weight of what was to come. The weight of her choices hung in the air as the seatbelt sign flickered off. Ava lingered in her seat, her movements deliberate and calm. She reached into her bag, retrieving her phone, and quickly typed a message. "We've landed. Be ready." With a sense of purpose, she tucked the phone away and cast a glance toward the front of the plane, where Miranda stood near the exit. Their eyes locked for a fleeting moment, sending a jolt through Miranda's stomach. As the cabin doors swung open, a rush of cool air from the jet bridge swept into the plane, and passengers began to exit in a steady stream, their soft conversations blending into the atmosphere. The air was thick with anticipation, the sound of clinking luggage handles echoing in the background. Miranda stood there, her body tense, forcing a smile for each passenger that drifted by. But inside, her heart raced wildly as she anxiously awaited Ava's approach. Ava, however, took her time, not rushing to join the line. Instead, she waited until the aisle was nearly empty before rising, gathering her belongings with the same calm precision that had defined her throughout the flight. As she made her way toward the exit, the remaining crew, Sophie Bennett and Mark Sullivan, exchanged subtle glances, a silent understanding passing between them. It was as if everyone could feel the weight of the moment, sensing that something truly significant was on the verge of unfolding with Ava's departure. As they reached the exit, Miranda straightened herself, summoning every ounce of courage to meet Ava's piercing gaze. "Thank you for flying with us, Miss Carter," she managed to say, her voice trembling just a bit. Ava paused, her expression unreadable, yet her eyes bore into Miranda with an intensity that sent a shiver racing down her spine. "I'm sure we'll be in touch," she replied smoothly, her tone heavy with unspoken implications. Without another word, Ava stepped off the plane, leaving Miranda frozen in a whirlwind of emotions. Mark Sullivan approached her cautiously, concern etched on his face. "You okay?" he asked, though his tone hinted that he already knew the answer. Miranda felt a storm brewing inside her, but she couldn't find the words to respond. Her eyes were locked onto the open door, a sense of anticipation hanging in the air, as if she were waiting for something, or someone, to emerge. And she was right to feel that way. Just moments later, two uniformed security officers entered the plane, their authoritative presence demanding instant focus. They swept their gaze across the cabin before honing in on Miranda. "Are you Lauren Mitchell?" one of them inquired, and Miranda felt her breath hitch in her throat. "Yes," she managed to reply, her voice trembling and barely a whisper. "We need you to come with us," the officer stated with unwavering resolve. "We have some questions regarding an incident on this flight." The color. The color drained from Miranda's face as the heavy burden of her actions finally crashed down on her. Mark Sullivan watched in silence, his heart aching, as the officers escorted her off the plane. Her stiff posture betrayed the rising panic within her. The remaining crew exchanged uneasy glances, their hearts pounding with uncertainty about what would happen next. Outside in the terminal, Ava stood near the gate, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She observed calmly as Miranda was led away, her expression a mask of unreadable emotions. The message she had sent earlier had done its job, and now the wheels were fully in motion. With a determined breath, Ava turned and walked toward the baggage claim, her mind racing with the implications of what was unfolding. With each step, she moved with a steady and purposeful grace, feeling no urge to glance back. Everything was unfolding just as she had envisioned. The vibrant energy of the airport terminal was a stark contrast to the profound stillness that enveloped Miranda as the security officers guided her away. Passengers who had shared the flight began to scatter, many casting curious looks at the dramatic scene. Whispers swirled around them, yet no one dared to approach Ava. She walked with an unshakable calm toward baggage claim, her demeanor composed, but every movement she made was charged with an undercurrent of emotion, felt so intentional, as if she were already 2 steps ahead of everyone else in that stark security holding area. Miranda sat in a small bare room with just a single table and 2 chairs. The officers who had escorted her off the plane loomed near the door, their faces a mask of professionalism, yet undeniably stern. Her mind raced, frantically trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had just unfolded. One moment, she was a respected flight attendant, and in the blink of an eye, she had become the focus of an investigation. The weight of that realization crashed down on her. This was far beyond a simple misunderstanding, hung in the air like a weighty cloud, shattering the oppressive silence. One of the officers finally spoke, his voice steady yet commanding. "Miss Scott, we've been informed of an incident involving a first-class passenger on your flight. The airline's executive team has requested a full account of your actions." Miranda felt a lump form in her throat, her heart racing as she struggled to find her voice. I don't know what this is about," she stammered, her words trembling with uncertainty. "I was just doing my job." The officer's eyebrow arched, skepticism etched on his face. "According to the reports we've received, the passenger you removed from first class was Emma Thompson. Are you aware?" As Miranda processed her position, a wave of despair washed over her. I I didn't know," she confessed, her voice trembling and barely above a whisper. "I only found out during the flight." The officer leaned in, his gaze piercing and unyielding. "Miss Carter is not just a high-ranking executive with this airline. She is also a significant shareholder. Her complaint has already reached the board, and they take allegations of bias and mistreatment with the utmost seriousness." Miranda's face drained of color, and she opened her mouth to respond, but the words failed her. The officer's tone grew more resolute as he continued. "Miss Carter's account of the events has been meticulously documented, and additional passengers have stepped forward to support her version of the story. We are offering you the chance to share your perspective, but let me be absolutely clear. This matter will not be treated lightly." Miranda's hands shook as she clutched the edge of the table, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. She yearned to defend herself, to articulate her actions, but the words felt searing and empty even before they could take shape. Deep down, she understood that there was no justification strong enough to withstand the scrutiny. She had made a hasty decision, a decision that had come at a tremendous cost, her more than she could have imagined. Meanwhile, at baggage claim, Ava stood near the carousel, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was steady, yet it held a weight of determination. "Yes, the security team has taken her in for questioning. Make sure the board reviews the footage and statements. I want this matter resolved, professionally but thoroughly." She listened intently for a moment, nodding slightly as the person on the other end of the call responded. "Thank you, and please send a copy of the final report to my office. I want to ensure that this never happens again." Once more, it wasn't directed at me or anyone else. As she ended the call, the first pieces of luggage began to appear on the conveyor belt. Ava reached for her elegant black suitcase, effortlessly pulling it off the belt. A few passengers from the flight observed her with a blend of curiosity and newfound admiration, but she didn't acknowledge them. Her focus was solely on what lay ahead. The terminal buzzed with the familiar chaos of arrivals and departures. Yet Ava navigated through it with unwavering determination. She had transformed an incident of prejudice into a powerful statement of resilience. Humiliation transformed into a powerful chance for accountability and profound systemic change. And Ava was far from finished. Her quiet strength and strategic brilliance had paved the way for a reckoning that Miranda and the airline would remember for a long time. Miranda found herself in that sterile room, her breath coming in shallow gasps as the heavy burden of the situation bore down on her. The officers allowed her a moment to gather her thoughts, but the silence enveloped her like a thick fog, making each passing second feel like an eternity, intensifying her anxiety. At last, she found her voice. Barely above a whisper, Miranda's voice trembled as she spoke. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Her eyes darted anxiously between the officers, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. "I was just following protocol. I thought, I thought she didn't belong in first class." The officer closest to her leaned in, his expression a mask of inscrutability. "And what exactly made you think that?" he pressed. Miranda's lips parted, ready to respond, but hesitation gripped her. The painful truth that her assumptions stemmed from unconscious bias weighed heavily on her heart, a truth she couldn't bring herself to voice. I... I don't know," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "She didn't act like the other passengers in first class." The officer shared a knowing glance with his partner before responding, his tone heavy with authority. Not acting like the other passengers isn't a valid reason to move someone to a different section, especially when their ticket was valid. Did she break any rules? Did she violate any airline policies? Miranda shook her head, her palms clammy with anxiety. "No," she whispered, but the officer interrupted her, his voice firm. "Then you acted without cause. Miss Carter was well within her rights to remain in the seat she paid for, and your actions have placed the airline in a very precarious situation." Miranda's heart sank, a wave of dread washing over her as the weight of the moment settled in. The weight of his words enveloped her, and though she yearned to argue, to defend her choices, the truth loomed large and undeniable. Her decision had been rooted in mere assumption, and now she was left to grapple with the fallout. Meanwhile, Ava had stepped out of the terminal, standing at the curb, her heart racing as a sleek black sedan glided to a stop. The driver, impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, emerged to open the door for her. "Miss Carter," he greeted, his voice steady and respectful, "everything has been arranged as per your instructions." "Thank you, Thomas Grant," she replied, her mind still swirling with the weight of her earlier choices. Replied, gracefully sliding into the back seat as she always did. Once settled, she pulled out her phone and began to scroll through her emails. A notification from the airline's board caught her eye, and she opened it without hesitation. The email was brief yet impactful, detailing the steps the board would take to address the incident, including a formal review of the airline's training policies and a promise that Miranda's actions would not go unpunished. A small smile of satisfaction curled at Ava's lips. She wasn't seeking revenge, but rather a sense of justice that felt long overdue. The weight of accountability and the promise of change hung heavily in the air, and it felt as though she was already on the path to progress. Back at the airport, the officers had concluded their questioning of Miranda, standing poised to leave the room. But before they departed, one of them delivered a final, piercing statement. "This matter will be escalated to the airline's disciplinary committee." The words struck her like a thunderclap. "You'll receive notification of their decision soon. In the meantime, you're suspended from duty." As the officers exited, Miranda's heart sank, leaving her alone with a whirlwind of thoughts. The harsh reality of her situation settled in, a chilling reminder of the uncertainty that lay ahead. The weight of her situation began to settle in, and for the first time, she truly grasped how profoundly she had underestimated Emma Thompson. At that very moment, Ava's car glided away from the terminal, seamlessly merging into the flow of traffic. As she gazed out the window, her mind felt serene and clear. The day had drained her, yet Ava was filled with a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing she had stood her ground and, in doing so, had forged a path for change. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, shattering her moment of reflection. It was another message from the airline's board, confirming that they would be conducting a comprehensive review of the incident is underway, and new sensitivity training for the staff is being implemented. Ava read the message with great care before responding, "Good. Let's make sure this never happens again." As the city skyline emerged in the distance, Ava leaned back in her seat, releasing a quiet breath. This chapter was nearing its end, but she felt a deep conviction that her actions today would resonate within the airline and hopefully touch the lives of everyone who worked there. Meanwhile, Miranda remained in the small room long after the officers had departed, her gaze fixed blankly on the table before her. The weight of the suspension, the impending investigation, and the piercing awareness of the consequences of her actions bore down on her like an unbearable burden. She found herself replaying every decision she had made that day, each moment unraveling her confidence more and more. What had once felt like an instinctual choice now loomed over her as an irrevocable error. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her spiraling thoughts. She hesitated before reaching for it, fully aware that whatever awaited her on the screen would not bring good news. A message from the airline's Human Resources Department. Kurt and formal Miranda, please brace yourselves for a disciplinary hearing set for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Your presence is required, and we understand this may be a challenging moment. Further details will be provided by email. Her hand trembled as she read the message, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. The hearing wasn't merely a formality, it was a desperate attempt for the airline to safeguard its reputation, and Miranda felt the chilling realization that she was being cast as the scapegoat. A surge of anger welled up inside her, a fierce desire to scream and fight back, but deep down, she understood the painful truth. There was nothing she could say to undo the damage. Meanwhile, Ava's car glided to a stop at her office, a sleek building standing proudly in the heart of the city. She stepped out with grace, her driver holding the door open for her. Inside, her assistant Isabella Cruz welcomed her with a warm smile and a stack of documents. "It's all here," Isabella Cruz said, handing over a folder filled with crucial information, the board's initial review of the incident, statements from the crew, and proposed changes to the training programs. They had moved quickly. Ava nodded, her expression pensive as she flipped through the pages. They understood that this situation couldn't simply be brushed aside. "Under the rug," she said with a calm resolve, "they're protecting their interests, but it's a step in the right direction." Isabella Cruz hesitated, her heart racing as she spoke carefully. "Do you think she'll fight back?" "The flight attendant, I mean." Ava paused, weighing the question thoughtfully. "Maybe," she finally replied, closing the folder with a sense of finality. "But this isn't about her anymore. This is about the system that allowed someone like her to feel comfortable making decisions based on prejudice. That's what truly needs to change." Isabella Cruz nodded, her admiration for Ava shining through. "You've already made an impact. The board is truly taking this to heart because of you." Ava offered a faint smile, yet remained silent, fully aware that their work was far from complete. Transforming the system demanded not just effort, but also unwavering support and patience, qualities Ava possessed in abundance. Back at the airport, Miranda finally stood up, her legs trembling as she stepped out of the holding room. She deliberately avoided the gaze of the officers and airport staff, making her way to the employee exit. The journey to her car felt like a heavy walk of shame, her uniform a painful reminder of a career that now dangled precariously by a thread. Miranda stared at the steering wheel, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She had poured her heart and soul into building a reputation as a capable and dedicated flight attendant, and now it felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. Images of Ava flashed before her, calm, composed, and seemingly untouchable. The realization hit Miranda like a punch to the gut. Ava had never lost control. She had been orchestrating everything since the moment Miranda stumbled. For the first time, Miranda allowed herself to feel something deeper than anger or frustration. A profound, gnawing regret settled heavily in her chest, and she couldn't shake the weight of it. Underestimated Emma Thompson, not just as a passenger, but as a person. And now she was facing the consequences. As Miranda drove away from the airport, Ava found herself in her office, poring over the documents Isabella Cruz had handed her. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again, this time lighting up with a message from the airline's CEO, requesting a personal meeting to discuss the incident and the next steps. With determination, Ava typed a brief reply. "I'll make time tomorrow. Let's ensure this is resolved promptly." She set her phone down and leaned back in her chair, her mind racing ahead to the future. The events of the day had ignited a fire within her. It had been an exhausting journey, but Ava understood that they had also unlocked a door, a chance to transform the very culture of an entire organization. For her, this was a battle worth fighting. The morning sun poured through the blinds in Ava's office, casting long, dramatic shadows across her desk as she readied herself for the meeting with the airline's CEO. She had devoted the night to meticulously reviewing documents, crafting statements, and contemplating the far-reaching consequences of the incident. To Ava, this was not merely about confronting her own experience. It was about establishing a precedent that would resonate for everyone. At exactly 10 a.m., it is utterly unacceptable for anyone, no matter their position or background, to endure the kind of treatment she faced. Her assistant, Isabella Cruz, guided the CEO, David Marshall, into the room. He was a tall, imposing figure in his late 50s, with striking silver-streaked hair and a polished demeanor that commanded respect. Yet beneath his confident exterior, there was an undeniable tension in his movements as he reached out his hand to Ava. "Miss Carter, thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice," Richard began, his tone carefully measured, revealing the weight of the moment. Ava shook his hand, her expression calm yet resolute, embodying a quiet strength. "I truly appreciate your seriousness in addressing this matter, Mr. Hale. Please take a seat." Richard settled into his chair, adjusting his tie as he prepared to speak. "First, let me extend my sincerest apologies for the incident on your flight. It was utterly unacceptable, and we are wholeheartedly dedicated to preventing such occurrences in the future." Ava nodded, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I'm relieved to hear that. However, mere apologies won't resolve the deeper issues at play. This situation transcends the actions of a single flight attendant. It reflects the environment that permitted her behavior." To feel justified in that decision, Richard's expression grew tense, yet he nodded in agreement. "You're absolutely right," he said, his voice steady. "That's why we've already begun a comprehensive review of our policies and training programs. We're implementing mandatory sensitivity and bias training for all staff, and we will be revisiting our internal reporting processes to ensure better accountability." Ava leaned back in her chair, studying him intently for a moment. "It's a start," she said, her tone firm, "but it's not enough. I want a detailed timeline for these changes, as well as regular updates on our progress. Their progress and I eagerly anticipate seeing tangible results." Richard paused for a moment, then nodded. "Of course, we'll provide you with everything you need." A small smile graced Ava's lips as she replied, "Good. Let's ensure this becomes a pivotal moment for your organization, not just a fleeting fix." The meeting unfolded for another hour, with Ava passionately outlining her expectations, while Richard diligently took notes. By the time it concluded, a palpable sense of purpose filled the room. As Richard rose to leave, he extended his hand once more, and this time there was a spark of determination in the air. There was a profound respect in his gaze. "Thank you for holding us accountable," he said, "and we will make this right." Ava shook his hand firmly, a promise lingering in the air. "I'll hold you to that." As Richard left, Isabella Cruz stepped into the room, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "How did it go?" Ava exhaled, a blend of relief and fierce determination coloring her voice. "It went well, but this is just the beginning." Meanwhile, as Ava's meeting unfolded, Miranda sat in a stark conference room at the airline's headquarters, anxiously awaiting her disciplinary hearing. The heavy burden of her suspension loomed over her like a dark cloud, casting a shadow on her thoughts. A heavy darkness loomed in the room, the silence wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket, intensifying her rising anxiety. In front of her lay a daunting stack of papers, each one a stark reminder of her actions during the flight and the complaints lodged by Emma Thompson. Suddenly, the door swung open, and 3 senior airline executives stepped inside, their faces a mask of neutrality, yet radiating an undeniable firmness. One of them, a woman with sharp features and an unmistakable air of authority, broke the tension first. "Miss Scott, thank you for coming. We're here to discuss the incident that occurred on Flight 287 and the serious allegations made against you, Miranda." She nodded weakly, her throat parched. "I understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The executives began to outline the timeline of events, pressing Miranda to recount what had transpired. As she attempted to explain her actions, her words felt empty, devoid of conviction, even to her own ears. "I thought she might have been in the wrong seat," Miranda admitted at one point, her voice trembling. "I was just trying to follow protocol." The sharply featured executive raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his face. "Protocol, according to our records, Miss Carter, indicates that you presented a valid first-class ticket." "Ticket? At what point did you verify this before asking her to move?" Miranda hesitated, her palms damp with anxiety. I I didn't," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of her confession pressing down on everyone present. Another executive, a middle-aged man with glasses, leaned forward, his expression stern. "Miss Scott, the airline has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Your actions not only violated that policy, but also jeopardized our reputation. Do you understand the severity of this situation?" Miranda nodded slowly, her heart sinking with the realization of the consequences. "I do." The panel continued their questioning, the tension palpable in the air. Their tone was professional, yet unyielding, and by the time the hearing concluded, Miranda felt completely crushed. The final decision would be delivered to her in writing, but deep down, she already knew the outcome. Her career with the airline was finished. As she walked out of the room, her thoughts drifted to Ava, the poised woman who had held on to her dignity, even as Miranda had torn it apart. For the first time, Miranda truly grasped the heavy burden of her actions, not only the devastation they wrought on her career, but also the pain inflicted on the person she had wronged. And as much as she longed to cast blame on the system or her own instincts, but deep down she understood the truth. She had made a choice, and now the weight of those consequences pressed heavily upon her. Later that afternoon, Ava found herself in her office, cradling a warm cup of tea, her heart racing as she reviewed an email from the airline's board. The message was unmistakable. They were eager to showcase their commitment to reform. Attached was a timeline of the changes she had passionately advocated for, including the rollout of mandatory training programs and revisions to their complaint handling processes. It was a small yet profoundly significant victory, and Ava felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Allowed herself a fleeting moment to embrace a sense of satisfaction, but then her phone buzzed, yanking her focus away from the screen. It was a message from Isabella Cruz. "Lauren Mitchell has been officially terminated. Thought you'd want to know." Ava set her cup down slowly, her gaze fixed on the message. It didn't fill her with joy, nor did it feel like a true resolution. Ava wasn't vindictive by nature. She understood that Miranda's dismissal was merely a symptom of a much larger issue. Yet it was a necessary step, a painful acknowledgement that actions indeed had consequences. She leaned back, a swirl of emotions churning within her. In her chair, Ava sat deep in thought, reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had unfolded over the past 24 hours. Her choice to act decisively was fueled by something far greater than mere personal affront. It was about setting a powerful example, not just for the airline, but for anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. With determination, she picked up her phone and quickly typed a message to Isabella Cruz. "Thanks for letting me know. Let's keep focusing on the bigger picture." Meanwhile, that evening, Miranda sat in her small apartment, the termination notice from the airline looming heavily on the table before her. She had spent 59 minutes, 58 seconds, hours replaying the hearing in her mind, desperately searching for some glimmer of justification for her actions, yet finding none. The harsh reality loomed over her, stark and unyielding. Her assumptions, tainted by prejudice, had cost her everything. Friends and family began to reach out, their messages a painful blend of sympathy and judgment. But Miranda couldn't summon the strength to respond. She felt utterly isolated, ensnared by the crushing weight of her mistakes. For years, she had taken pride in being a competent professional, someone who adhered to the rules and executed her job with excellence. But now, all of that felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the enormity of her failure. As she sat there, feeling the weight of her thoughts, she turned on the television, desperately seeking a distraction. But instead, the first thing that flashed before her eyes was a news segment about bias in the workplace. It felt as if the universe was conspiring to force her to face her own choices. The segment showcased a brief interview with Emma Thompson, who spoke with such grace about the necessity of systemic change and the need for organizations to be held accountable. Miranda found herself glued to the screen, her heart racing and her chest tightening. Ava's serene composure and articulate words only amplified the chaos within Miranda, highlighting the stark contrast between their worlds. The moment she laid eyes on Ava, it struck her like a bolt of lightning. This was not an adversary, but a person who deserved so much more. Someone who had every right to fight for herself and for others. Turning off the TV, Miranda sat in a heavy silence, the weight of her past actions pressing down on her. She understood that she couldn't erase what had happened, but perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a way to grow from it. With a trembling heart, she reached for her laptop and began to type an email. It was addressed to the airline's board, but her intention was not to defend herself. Instead, she poured her soul into a sincere apology. Not just to Ava, but to everyone her choices had impacted. For the first time in days, a flicker of hope ignited within Miranda, a glimmer of redemption. A glimmer of understanding washed over her. While the past was unchangeable, the future was still hers to shape. The following week, Ava found herself staring at an unexpected email, forwarded to her by the airline's board, with a subject line that caught her breath. An apology from a former staff member. Intrigued, she opened it and began to read. The message was from Lauren Mitchell, and it began with a heartfelt acknowledgement of her wrongdoings. "Miss Carter, I owe you an apology. My actions on that flight were inexcusable. I acted on assumptions rather than facts, and I failed to see you for who you truly are. A cherished passenger and, even more significantly, a human being who deserved utmost respect. My actions not only cast a shadow on my character, but also on the airline as a whole, and for that I am genuinely remorseful." Ava read the email with care, absorbing the heartfelt tone of sincerity. Miranda continued to share how the aftermath of the incident had compelled her to engage in profound self-reflection regarding her actions and their repercussions. She bravely acknowledged her biases and fervently expressed her commitment to educate herself and evolve into a better person. "This experience has been profoundly humbling, and I have come to realize that the changes you are fighting for are not just necessary in this airline. They are essential everywhere. I hope that, despite my wrong actions, I can be a catalyst for the change that must happen. I am wholeheartedly committed to learning from this experience and ensuring I never make such a mistake again. Thank you for holding me accountable." Ava leaned back in her chair after finishing the email, her thoughts a whirlwind. She wasn't naive. She understood that people often apologize to ease their guilt or protect their reputation. Yet something about Miranda's words resonated deeply with her, feeling undeniably sincere. And Ava. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had to pause just for a moment before crafting a heartfelt reply. "Thank you for your message. Accountability is the first step toward growth. I truly hope you continue on this path and use this experience to foster positive change in the future." With a deep breath, Ava hit send, then closed her laptop, her gaze drifting out the window. For her, this incident transcended mere personal justice. It was about igniting a ripple effect. And while Miranda's apology couldn't undo the past, it carried a glimmer of hope for transformation. It was a small step, but Ava felt it in her heart. She knew it mattered. Even the tiniest steps can blossom into something monumental. As weeks drifted by, the profound ripple effects of the incident on Flight 287 began to resonate deeply. The airline took a significant stride by launching its inaugural series of mandatory sensitivity and bias training sessions for all staff, a decision that was proudly shared with the public alongside a heartfelt statement of accountability. Ava's pivotal role in advocating for these transformative changes was acknowledged with a gentle yet respectful nod in the announcement, portraying her not as an adversary, but as a powerful catalyst for progress. These changes ignited meaningful conversations throughout the community. In the aviation industry, as other airlines began to reassess their policies, Several sought Ava's guidance directly. However, she gracefully declined most of these offers, choosing instead to dedicate herself fully to her work with this particular airline. For her, it was never about seeking personal recognition. It was about making a meaningful, lasting impact. One afternoon, as Nava returned to the airport to catch a flight for a business meeting, she felt a remarkable change in the atmosphere. Approaching the gate, she noticed the staff interacting with passengers in a way that was truly heartwarming. Smiles that radiated sincerity, and every question met with genuine care. Was met with a response filled with patience and genuine care. It may not have been flawless, no system ever is, but it marked a significant improvement, and that alone was a promising beginning. As Ava approached the gate, the agent's face lit up with recognition. "Miss Carter, welcome back. We've upgraded your seat as a token of our appreciation for your continued support," they said with warmth that wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. Ava's heart swelled at the kind gesture, yet she waved it off with grace. "That's very kind of you, but I'm perfectly fine where I am," she replied, her confidence and humility shining through effortlessly. It was a blend that commanded respect without ever demanding it. As she stepped onto the plane, Ava couldn't help but notice. There were delicate shifts in the demeanor of the crew. They appeared more attentive, more connected with the passengers. She settled into her seat, quietly taking in the rhythm of the cabin as people found their places. Across the aisle, a young woman wrestled with her bag, desperately trying to fit it into the overhead compartment. Almost instinctively, a flight attendant came to her aid, their voice warm and comforting. It brought back memories for Ava of Sophie Bennett, the one attendant who had shown her such kindness during her own difficult time. Ava had made sure to highlight Sophie Bennett's professionalism, grateful for the compassion she had received. In her conversations with the board, Sophie Bennett had recently ascended to a senior role. Ava noticed her near the front of the cabin, overseeing the boarding process with a calm and assured presence. When Sophie Bennett caught Ava's gaze, a warm smile exchanged between them, filled with gratitude and understanding. Ava responded with a subtle nod, a silent recognition of the respect they held for one another. It was these precious moments that fueled Ava's relentless pursuit for change. She believed that even the smallest gestures, when nurtured over time, could ignite a profound transformation within an entire culture. As the plane soared into the sky, Ava reclined in her seat, reflecting on the journey ahead.